I had prepared remarks here, but I know that time, like I said, is not on our side. But let me tell you something else that we're celebrating. No one knows better than us that CEWARN works. Because when we go before the Peace and Security Council of the AU, they always ask us, where are you getting your information from? And we say, you know what, we're getting it from our recs. We do joint analysis with them, we do joint reporting with them, so they work. But that's the issue, that's not the issue. Everybody has been saying here that response is the problem. Now, we've come a long way, we're happy to eat the cake today, but let me tell you what is awaiting us for 2018. First, we have 18 elections, actually 19, because now Liberia has told us that they're having elections this year. And these elections are a moment to renew leadership. It's a moment for a renewal of ideas. But on the African continent, the reality is that we're extremely vulnerable during the elections, from issues related to the commission, the Electoral Commission, to the voter registration, and so on and so forth. And all this is happening at a time when social media is a new tool that we're faced with. Now, in the IGAD region, you will have 2 elections, or actually, you're supposed to have 2, but there is, there will be February, I think there'll be elections in Djibouti, but South Sudan is also expected normally to have elections, but that's another story for another day. On the other threat that we're faced with is that conflicts that are currently ongoing risk escalating. Martin was mentioning that we're entering a very dangerous time. The reality is that we have 15 conflicts right now on the continent. And out of the 15, the most intractable ones and the most difficult ones are in this region. In fact, half of AU and UN peacekeeping forces on the continent are in this region. So we are concerned that going forward, as we reach key milestones, I mentioned elections, I mentioned issues related to the implementation of key peace agreements, we're concerned that we may see another rise in terms of conflicts. The third issue that we have is that even countries which seems to be stable or which have experienced conflict are now relapsing again. And all this put together is a cause of concern for us, and we can no longer just be talking about alerting, but we need to do more in terms of responding. And by the way, I can talk about many other threats that we're faced with, but these threats are happening in a particular context. I would have talked about terrorism, cybersecurity, and so on, but let me just talk about the context within all this is happening. First, the IMF tells us that the economic outlook for 2018, that the African continent will be growing by 3.8%. In other words, we're not going to be growing the way we were supposed to go with 5 to 6, 7%. So, and all of this at a time when multilateralism is in retreat, and this is likely to continue in the foreseeable future. And this will have significant impact on access to funding for peacekeeping, humanitarian action, and our ability to intervene in general. In other words, we have more problem and less resources to deal with them. To quote Antonio Gramizzi from Prison Notebooks, he says that the crisis of multilateralism today consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. And in this transition, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Excellencies, let me suggest a few areas where we can intervene, or at least to try to have an impact, linking early warning to early response. First, we must deal with the issue of denialism. Denialism is our #1 challenge. Someone tells you you have a problem, yet you say, no, I do not have a problem. We say we want to come and help you because you signed up to the AU Constitutive Act, you signed up to the mechanism that IGAD is supposed to. We say, no, we got it under control. So the issue of denialism is a problem for us, and we must address it. Second, although we have made notable achievements in terms of peace and security, in terms of intervention, preventive diplomacy, and so on, one issue we need to determine is, what is the benchmark for success? You know, every time there is a conflict, we're always busy having meetings here and there, but are we having an impact? Are we making a difference on the ground for the people who are suffering? I served in Somalia for 5 years, throughout the whole offensive of the African Union mission. And I remember that every time we would go into a meeting, they would tell us that we've had 14 peace conferences. Surely. Now, look what's happening in South Sudan. It's a great cause of concern. Second, as I mentioned earlier on, we have elections. The truth is, we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Our electoral models maybe are not working. There's not a single election on the African continent today that is not contested. So what's wrong? The way we do observer mission, maybe we need to look at it. We need to improve the way we are doing things. Third, as we fight against violent extremism, I believe that we need to play a more important role in terms of ensuring that the state's response is grounded in human rights and the rule of law. In fact, any counterterrorism expert, and Martin, you can contradict me if I'm wrong, will tell you that the best counterterrorism effort is the protection of human rights. Allow me to zero in a little bit on human rights. This issue is of concern to us because for some reason, when you read articles in the news or elsewhere, it's as if human rights is not defending human rights is not an African thing. Some of it is our fault, but some of it is a certain narrative that is created. But I can tell you this, a spike in human rights violation and abuses, such as the harassment and arbitrary detention of bloggers, journalists, and opposition leaders, are often the very early signs that a country could be sliding into a crisis or conflict sooner or later. Almost without exception, the conflicts that we witness in and out of our continent today were preceded by a pattern of human rights violation coupled with impunity for such violations. These same kind of violations are what are driving tens of hundreds of our young men and women into violent extremism or into the sea, trying to go to Europe. When conflict erupts, human rights violations become even more rampant and widespread, as we have seen in many countries. So what does this link between human rights and peace and security mean for us? For one, it means that we should begin to integrate more the language of human rights in our engagement with our member states. Our shared values insofar as human rights is concerned are well articulated in regional instruments, such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and given its stature and mandate of our organizations, we are well poised to rise as a champion of these instruments, calling on our states to sign, ratify, and domesticate with these instruments. The other thing that we need to do, and I'll leave with this point because I know that time is not on our side, is to really address structural vulnerabilities of our member states. The reality is that our early warning systems always work. In fact, there is not a single conflict that our early warning systems have not identified early on. But like I said, the issue has been the response. But for now, what we're focusing on, at least at the AU, is to tackle structural vulnerabilities, because that's really conflict prevention. And we're doing this with IGAD by identifying member state structural vulnerabilities and working with them on how they can mitigate them. Last but not least, we need to build and strengthen national capabilities, because we need to recognize that internationally led preventive diplomacy efforts might serve only to avert violence in the short term, but ultimately only national mechanisms and institutions can sustainably prevent violent conflicts in the long run. Indeed, we have actually built many early warning systems within our member states, and they are working well. And the last one actually we're working on is on Ethiopia. And so without really depressing all of you with all the challenges that we have, I would like to say that despite all these challenges, there is hope. There is hope because, as the Chinese say, from every crisis, there is an opportunity. And the opportunity is to strengthen what we do, is to speak the truth to each other, and to do well. We'll be doing a service to all the people who have worked to build all these institutions, whether it is the CEWARN or the Continental Early Warning Mechanism, and to forge a better path for our future and for the next generations. I believe it's a challenge that we can deal with, and I think that it's a challenge of our generation. I thank you very much, and once again, happy birthday.